Last year, in his acceptance of the Nobel Prize for Literature, the playwright Harold Pinter made an epic speech. He asked why, and I quote him, "The systematic brutality, the widespread atrocities, the ruthless suppression of independent thought in Stalinist Russia were well known in the West, while American state crimes were merely superficially recorded, let alone documented." Unquote. And yet across the world, the extinction and suffering of countless human beings could be attributed to rampant American power. But, said Pinter, you wouldn't know it. It never happened. Nothing ever happened. Even while it was happening, it wasn't happening. It didn't matter. It was of no interest. Unquote. Pinter's words were more than the surreal. The BBC ignored the speech of Britain's greatest dramatist. I've made a number of documentaries about Cambodia. The first was Year Zero, The Silent Death of Cambodia. It describes the American bombing that provided a catalyst for the rise of Pol Pot. What Nixon and Kissinger had started, Pol Pot completed. CIA files alone leave no doubt of that. I offered Year Zero to PBS and took it to Washington. The PBS executives who saw it were shocked. They whispered among themselves. They asked me to wait outside. One of them finally emerged and said, "John, we admire your film, but we are disturbed that it says the United States prepared the way for Pol Pot." And I said, "Well, do you dispute the evidence?" I'd quoted a number of CIA documents and others. And, "Oh, no," he replied. "But we've decided to call in a journalistic adjudicator." Now, the term a journalistic adjudicator might have been invented by George Orwell. In fact, they managed to find the only only one of 3 journalists who'd been invited to Cambodia by Pol Pot. And of course he turned his thumbs down on the film, and I never heard from PBS again. Year Zero was broadcast in some 60 countries and became one of the most watched documentaries in the world. It was never shown in the United States. Of the 5 films I made on Cambodia, one of them was shown by WNET, the PBS station in New York. I believe it was shown at about 1 in the morning. On the basis of this single showing, when most people were asleep, it was awarded an Emmy. What marvelous irony. It was worthy of a prize, but not an audience. Harold Pinter's subversive truth, I believe, was that he made the connection between imperialism and fascism and described a battle for history that's almost never reported. This is the great silence of the media age. And this is the secret heart of propaganda today. A propaganda so vast in scope that I'm always astonished that so many Americans know and understand as much as they do. We are talking about a system, of course, not personalities, and yet a great many decent people believe the problem is George W. Bush and his gang. And yes, the Bush gang are extreme, but my experience is that they're no more than an extreme version of what has gone before. In my lifetime, more wars have been started by liberal Democrats than by Republicans. Ignoring this truth is a guarantee that the propaganda system and the war-making system will continue. We've had a branch of the Democratic Party running Britain for the last 10 years. Blair, apparently a liberal, has taken Britain to war more times than any Prime Minister in the modern era. Yes, his current pal is George Bush, but his first love was Bill Clinton, the most violent president of the 20th century, the late 20th century. Blair's successor, Gordon Brown, is also a devotee of Clinton and Bush. The other day, Brown said, "The days of Britain having to apologise for the British Empire are over. We should celebrate." Like Blair, like Clinton, like Bush, Brown believes in the liberal truth that the battle for history has been won, that the millions who died in deliberately British Imperial India will be forgotten, like the millions who have died in the American Empire will be forgotten. And like Blair, his successor is confident that professional journalism is on his side. For most journalists, whether they realise it or not, are groomed to be tribunes of an ideology that regards itself as non-ideological, that presents itself as the natural centre, the very fulcrum of civilised modern life. This may well be the most powerful and most dangerous ideology we have ever known, because it's open-ended. This is liberalism. I'm not denying the virtues of liberalism, far from it. We're all beneficiaries of them. But if we deny its dangers, its open-ended project, and the all-consuming power of its propaganda, then we deny our right to the true democracy, because liberalism and true democracy are not the same. Liberalism began as a cult of the elite in the 19th century, and true democracy is never handed down by elites. It is always fought for and struggled for. A senior member of the anti-war coalition, United for Peace and Justice, said recently, and I quote her, "The Democrats are using the politics of reality," unquote. Her liberal historical reference point was Vietnam. She said that President Johnson began withdrawing troops from Vietnam after a Democratic Congress began to vote against the war. That's not what happened. The troops were withdrawn from Vietnam over 4 long years, and during that time the United States killed more people in Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos with bombs than were killed in all the preceding years. And that's what's happening in Iraq. The bombing has doubled since last year, and this is not being reported. And who began this bombing? Bill Clinton began it. During the 1990s, Clinton rained bombs on Iraq in what was euphemistically called the no-fly zones. At the same time, he imposed a medieval siege called economic sanctions, killing, as I've mentioned, perhaps 1 million people, including